Hello and welcome to this, the first of hopefully many Onyx Group webinars. My name is Andy Rigby and I'm the hosting engineer at Onyx Group's Newcastle data center facility. The theme of today's webinar is colocation and how your company can gain a business advantage from it. Colocation. Hold on, I'll wait till everyone's in. There we go. Okay. Colocation is becoming more and more popular with businesses investing more and more in their critical data. This trend has led to an increase in the number of companies to abandoning their in-house infrastructures and instead choosing to outsource to third-party suppliers. So the question is, should you be joining them? That's a little about me there. Okay, so here's a brief rundown of the topics we'll be looking at over the next 30 minutes. So we've got what is colocation, operations benefits of colocation, business benefits of colocation, features of colocation, and is colocation right for you? Okay, we'll start off with a brief explanation of what we mean by colocation. From an IT's perspective, it simply means to pay a third party to house your kit in their data center. There are many variations of colocation available, which normally can be tailored to your needs. For example, if you have a couple of servers, you're probably not going to want to pay for a full rack. The options available are normally along the lines of either a full rack, a half rack, a quarter rack, or by you. Now, if you have any experience with rack-mounted devices, you'll probably have come across the term U before. When we talk about U's, we're talking about a rack unit, which is the measurement of the height of a rack-mountable device. So 1 U is approximately 1.75 inches. So to put that into perspective, a typical rack in a data center can hold around 42 U, but there are bigger and smaller racks available on the market. Okay, so why would you want to put your expensive and potentially mission-critical kit into somebody else's building? It is a big decision. You're putting a lot of trust into another company to keep your kit up and running so your business can have constant access to your data. So we'll have a brief look at a few of the reasons and then we'll explore them in more depth in later slides. Security is a big reason. Odds are a data center will have a lot better physical security than your current workplace. Physical threats can come in many forms, from somebody breaking into your building to threats from your own staff. For example, a disgruntled employee might try and physically sabotage your kit. Extreme case, I know, but it can happen. A lot of people worry that they won't be able to get access to their kits at certain times of the day, but it simply isn't the case. Most data centers will give you 24/7 access to your kit if needed, as well as provide some level of support from their own on-site engineers. Flexibility and scalability are other major advantages of colocation. You can add to and remove from your rack as your business dictates, and if there is a major growth needed, you can always buy more racks. You might have a situation where you're running out of space in your current environment, or if your business owns their own data center that is reaching capacity, it might be more cost effective to rent some extra space from a third party as opposed to buying a whole new building. So this leads us on to cost effectiveness. As I said, basically you won't have to buy or build a dedicated building or maintain a private infrastructure. Okay, so yeah, the initial infrastructure will be an expensive one. Then you'll need to think about who will maintain it. So you'll have to think about, does your current staff have the skill sets? Would you need to hire more staff for this? By using a data center, you're able to free up more time and resources to concentrate on your core business, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. You don't want to be spending valuable time and resources troubleshooting infrastructure problems, because that's not your business. That's the data center supplier's business. Okay, so having your kit in an accredited data center is also a major selling point, both for you and for any of your customers. A good example is ISO 27001. You might well have heard of it. It's the standard for security management, which best ensures best practice for security controls to protect information assets. So this ISO certification and many others will be assessed every 6 months by a third-party auditor. So that gives you peace of mind that a data center is looked after and your data is looked after to that standard. And I can tell you from first-hand experience that these audits are very in-depth. Okay, to try and recreate the redundant data center environment in your office in terms of build, bandwidth and power could be potentially expensive. Data centers also offer you the flexibility of moving offices and expanding offices, so you won't have to move your IT equipment around with you as you move around. It will always be in one place. And depending on your situation, you may require a short-term solution in which a data center can be an ideal situation. A lot of companies these days implement DR, that's disaster recovery plans. This is where they replicate their data from the main site or office to the backup kit, which is located in the data center, in case of a disaster, for example flooding or an power outage. Finally, data centers are generally located in geologically safe locations, and what we're talking about there is in terms of natural disasters, such as flooding, which is something we know a lot about in the UK recently. I know our American friends have to consider other things, such as earthquakes and tornadoes, so we don't have it too bad in some respects. Okay, so let's have a deeper look at some of the typical features of a data center. Okay, the environment. Data centers are typically laid out in rows of racks and in hot and cold aisle configurations. So the front of the rack is referred to as the cold aisle. So this is where cold air is pumped into the aisle through vents in the floor. The servers or devices take the cold air and cool themselves down and vent the hot air that they produce out the back. The hot air then leaves the back of the rack into the hot aisle, where the air conditioning units at the end of each row extracts it from the room. In addition to this environment is the cold aisle containment. This is a fairly new process, but a lot of data centers are adapting to it now. This is where the cold aisle is sealed off completely from the rest of the data center environment using blanking plates, or you can use PVC curtains or hard panel boards. As you can see there on the picture, this is the Newcastle data center that we use hard panel boards and doors at the end of the aisle. This ensures that the cold air is forced through the devices and doesn't mix with the rest of the air in the data center. It's more efficient and it doesn't cause what we call hot spots. The benefits are the devices are better cooled, so that internal fans won't need to work as hard, therefore using less power and ultimately saving money. So with power cables and network cables, it's a bad idea to mix the two, as this can cause network interference due to EMF, which is electromagnetic field, produced by power cables. So for this reason, data centers use raised floors and overhead trays. Generally, power goes under the floor and network overhead, but it can be the other way around. Fire suppression system. This is a must-have for any data center. The desired effect is to put out fires and not affect the electrical equipment. So obviously water and electrical devices don't mix. So we tend to use gaseous agents such as FM200. What this does is it removes heat and oxygen from the room, which is two of the three necessary ingredients for most fires. That's my fire warden training coming into play there. These sophisticated systems have detection criteria to prevent that going off in case of a false alarm. So when one sensor detects smoke or heat, the system will enter a pre-alarm state and will only release the gas when one or two more sensors detect the smoke as well. And finally there we've got remote or intelligent hands. This is a term we use to describe a service that the data center engineers will provide. Basically, if you need a server physically rebooting or a tape change, for example, they will carry that out. It's generally advertised by time limit, so for example 15 minutes of intelligent hands, but it's very loosely based. It's not like they're going to not do anything after 15 minutes kind of thing. Okay, so as we mentioned earlier, redundancy is a major and arguably the biggest advantage of a data center. So if we start with power, there are layers of redundancy involved when talking about power. The raw mains power comes in from the national grid, as it would do with any other building or home, but this is then distributed through N+1 UPS systems, which can correct common utility power problems such as voltage spikes. But the primary role of these UPSs, or uninterruptible power supplies, is to provide short-term power in the event of a mains outage. This is done by storing charge in rows and rows of rechargeable batteries. As you can see there in the second picture along, those are what we call banks of batteries. Okay, what this does is the batteries immediately take the load when no input is detected from the mains, i.e. the power's gone out. The batteries will then take the load and temporarily support the UPSs until the backup generator kicks into life. This is done automatically, talking a matter of seconds kind of thing. The generator will have a fuel tank which can be topped up if needed be. You'll find that a lot of data centers will have a contract with a local supplier for fuel, so they'll never run out. I mentioned the term N+1 earlier on. I'll probably explain what this means. For example, if the load can be supplied by 3 UPSs, then the setup will include 1 more UPS in case one fails, so it takes out the single point of failure. Another less common configuration is what we call 2N. So this would be, for every UPS, there would be another UPS, which is considered overkill. Okay. In the racks themselves, you will be provided with 2 power strips, typically come in pairs, and are connected to 2 different UPSs for redundancy. Most devices these days, as you probably know, come with dual power supplies, so it's a good idea to distribute them over these 2 power strips so you have fully resilient devices. Next comes networking. You'll generally be provided with 2 network feeds. These feeds will connect to 2 different switches owned by the data center, which will in turn eventually connect to 2 different core routers, which will then connect to 2 or more different lines out to the building, thus providing a resilient network infrastructure. Within your environment, it's a good idea to continue the resiliency onto your own kit, so we advise that each feed is connected to, say, 2 different switches, which in turn connect to 2 different firewalls, eliminating any point of single failure within your network. Obviously this decision is completely up to you, but it will ultimately come down to cost. And finally, we have redundant cooling. Air conditioning units are again deployed in an N+1 configuration, taking out the single point of failure. And if you've ever worked with modern day SANs or blade servers, you'll know they produce an incredible amount of heat. And then if the room isn't adequately cooled, it can get very hot very quickly. It's recommended that a temperature range of between 16 and 24 degrees C and a humidity range of between 40 and 55% is optimum for a data center. Humidity is the amount of water in the air, so you don't want it to be too humid or water might condense onto your internal components, which is not good. And if humidity is too low, it will result in static electricity discharge, again, not good for your components. These industrial-sized air conditioning units are able to monitor the temperature and the humidity and adjust accordingly. Even in the winter, we're able to bring in cold air from the outside. This is what we call free cooling, as it's essentially free from the outside environment. Okay, security. You'll probably find that different data centers have different approaches to their physical security. The higher end facilities, such as those used by banks, for example, can incorporate biometrics, such as retinal scanners, as well as it's well known for visitors to be weighed in and weighed out to make sure they haven't taken anything with them. You will always be asked to provide your ID. you will also be asked to sign in, and this sign-in process will display a photo which will have been previously taken of you. Then you will generally be issued a card that will grant you access to the data floor. So once you've got in the building, you're not on the data floor, you're in the reception area. So to get access to the data floor, you need a card or to the particular suite you are authorized to access. So these cards are controlled via a central system which will assign different levels of access so that only certain cards can open certain doors. Obviously this depends on the data center itself. As a backup, there will generally be a physical sign-in sheet too. That's for fire safety reasons. Most data centers will require prior notification of your arrival, including the date and the time, as well as you having to show your own ID. So when you sign up for a contract with the data center, they will most likely ask you to submit an access list, which is a list of staff members that you want to give access to your kit, and the data center staff will follow that list. Nobody else will be able to get access to your kit. And this access can actually be broken down further. So for example, you can have full access, which lets you go in, do your work, take things in and out, but just to your rack. You can have lesser accesses, which mean you can go in and do work, but not physically add or remove anything from the building. So this access can be tailored to your needs. Once you've been granted access to the building and then onto the data floor, you'll still need to be given access to the rack itself. All the racks will be locked. That's a standard, always locked. Generally with a keypad lock-in system, which only the data center staff will know. And they will physically take you to the rack and enter the code and open it up for you. Some advanced rack models can be networked so that the individual racks can be remotely opened by the data center staff. In terms of physical security, the building will generally have a perimeter fence, which will be locked at night time. There will also be CCTV cameras both inside and outside the building, which will be monitored from a central point, as well as the alarm systems connected to the police or a security company. Okay, so hopefully by this point you'll have an idea, if colocation is right for you. If not, then here's a list of a couple of questions that you can ask yourself. Is your current server environment suitable? So are the cooling and airflow suitable and not a danger to your hardware? I mean, most modern day servers are able to monitor temperature and can alert you to issues if they get too hot. But a lot of older ones won't be able to do that, so they will just die and you won't know about it until it happens. So how good is your physical security? So what you need to do is look at your building's access procedures and decide, is that a risk to your business? How much space do you have for expansion? If your kit is housed in, say, a storeroom, for example, are you able to add more to it and still keep the environment in a suitable state for your hardware? Are there cables all over the place, for example? Are there health and safety issues involved? Things like that. How much are you paying for your electricity and bandwidth? Obviously that's down to the individual situation, but you could potentially save money there. And again, going back to, do you want the hassle of looking after the infrastructure? If you're a smaller company, odds are you don't have a designated team to look after the infrastructure. So as we said before, you'll end up spending a lot of time troubleshooting internet issues on your single internet line that goes down all the time, when you could be saving time and focusing more on your core business. And finally, do you have a disaster recovery plan? And if not, what is the cost to your company of losing services during an outage? This is one of the main reasons people choose colocation. You need to consider both the financial damage as well as the damage to your reputation. Also consider any SLAs you have in place for customers and whether you're breaking them or not. Okay, so here's a little about the Onyx Group. We've been around for 18 years in this sector. We currently have 5 data centres, one in Edinburgh, one in Glasgow, Middlesbrough, Newcastle and Sheffield. And we were the first to gain ISO 27001 accreditation. That's the one we talked about earlier on. Okay, so that concludes today's webinar. If you're interested in seeing a data center for yourself firsthand, you can book a facility tour by contacting us on this phone number or via the email. Also, if you want any more information, you can visit the Onyx Group's website.